All right, one thing I forgot to do in that last lecture, I'd shown you part of it. Let me bring up part 2. But anyway, I had forgotten to show you. I show you how you could use lay freeze, but there's other ways of doing that. Let's go type layer. Whoops, nice to be in AutoCAD. All right. In your layer dialog box, let's click inside here. If we scroll down to here's the ceiling layers we created, and you notice there's this funny little thing right here. This means in this current viewport, these layers are frozen. So we really should have had both of these frozen. We haven't put any mechanical diffusers in, but right now, because our lighting, I brought it in on the grid layer. Oops, bad, Mr. Lane. Well, here, let's undo this real quick and you'll see what I'm talking about. All right, let me go in here. Let's grab these items. And if we go to the properties for these, you'll find home layer. They're on the grid layer. Those blocks shouldn't be on the grid layer. They should be on the electrical layer. So let's put them on the layer that they're supposed to be on. Click back outside of the block. Get over here. You will now notice they're visible here. They shouldn't be. So if we come inside here on that little viewport thing, next to the normal freeze thaw, you have this freeze thaw and viewport. That's what this means. If we scroll this over, it actually says VP freeze. We can control them this way too. Lay freeze sometimes gives you trouble because it keeps grabbing the layer you've inserted your block on or something like that instead of the layer that you're trying to freeze. So sometimes you're probably going to have to come in here. The actual command for doing that is VP layer. And like I can thaw all the layers in here, which would be really stupid because if you remember, there's a whole bunch of stuff. But that'll work. And I could have done the same thing. I could go VP layer, freeze, AC asterisk. And so using that AIA layer structure, unlike the stupid layout names they have here in this drawing, it makes it very easy to freeze and thaw layers. That's one of the reasons that the AI layer structure is set up like it is, instead of to arch, plan, wall, below, or something stupid like that. You notice these don't have any kind of standardized naming structure. Well, sort of. My guess is, like I said, I think this came out of a piece of software that's doing the drawing stuff for people. So like when you insert a block, like a refrigerator, it automatically creates this layer called one arch plan fridge. Same with lockers, mirrors. I mean, this to me looks like, if you're creating a layer for sinks and showers, and stoves, that's probably something like Revit that's creating that. So I doubt that this drawing was originally made in AutoCAD. Just as a note. Yeah, don't take this wall base as even though they've got it in here as an example drawing, I can give you better example drawings that follow the AI layer structure, and you're better off with those. But anyway, I was supposed to mention that in last time's assignment. Oops, sorry. But let's look at some other things while we're in this file. Let's make a circle. Whoops. And let's make a polyline. And we'll just close it. Under Mview, make view, one of your options is object. If we hit O, I can pick this circle and turn that into a viewport. I can also do that with this closed polyline. Of course, it has to be closed. Oops, let's PE. For some reason, it's not closed. One thing PolyEdit will do is close your viewports. Close your polylines. Now let's try Mview, object, book. If you have big L-shaped drawings, sometimes this is useful. Remember, you can grab the grips to adjust these all you need to. These don't have the grips. I mean, you can adjust the scale of it, but that's really all you can do with the grips on the circular ones. If we look back on that example drawing I showed to start the other lecture, I actually have a circular viewport here where we're looking at, we needed this really blown up to basically, half full size, which is what this is, and we just drew a line saying, hey, look at this. Rather than do it as a separate detail, we just brought it out because we needed to show where some sealants and all this other stuff was in this so that we don't get water into this whole little connection that's holding this piece of cast stone on the edge of the building. Yeah, it's way more detail than you need to worry about, but this is one of the few places where I've actually used a viewport that's made out of an object. Generally, rectangular viewports are just fine. You'll find that you copy them all the time. This is an interesting one. If you look at the actual, well, here, look, copy these down, just so you see what I'm talking about. Oh, and normally your background won't be black; it'll be white. I did it because it's a little easier to read. But let's move these about for a minute, and I'll show you something interesting. Oops, I think I'm still in copy. Get away over here. This viewport here, like I said, we were looking at the building sections. And I didn't want to make a detail that used up all this space when this little end is all I really needed. So I took this, put it at my break line, and took another viewport and created a detail that way, which, if y'all have seen any drawings, we use these break lines a lot. So this was a real handy way of doing that kind of detail, rather than drawing, copying and doing the detail from scratch. This is really a safer way to do things so that you've got your real drawings out here. That's actually what we're looking at. You've got your real drawing out here in the wall, in the building section. And there's actually a wall section that shows all of this, and then we had just that detail. But everything is done right here, so we don't have to worry about updating. Oh, well, that's not what the detail shows, so we need to go fix the detail now. If everything's done in this drawing, things work a little better. Now, okay, the problem with that is one person can work in this file at a time, and that's it. So if you really do this, it's probably better. I was the only person on this job, so it didn't matter. It's probably better to do these as separate drawings and then bring them into the drawing that's going to create all of these details. That's going to be up to how your office manager wants to do things. Sometimes you won't do that. We're going to talk about XREFs soon. XREFs make this really, really useful. So there are ways to do stuff other than what I've got this sheet set up like. But like I said, I was the only person working on this file, so it didn't matter. That was convenient, and so I did it that way. Makes for a very big file, though. Oops. But in a real situation, you'd never want to do this because it limits the number of people that can be on the job. So that's how to do it with objects. Let's look at some of the other things that Mview does. Mv, you notice it's got polygonal. We could, instead of making that polyline, we could actually have hit the P option, and then it lets us draw a polygonal viewport, from scratch. Ooh ah, ooh ah. Either way, doesn't really matter. I mean, if you use the polyline technique or the polygonal technique, you're going to end up with the L shape or whatever weird shape viewport you need. But that's kind of how you'll handle all this kind of stuff. And remember, we can, like in these layers here, if we don't want to see a whole bunch of detail, we can freeze out those A detail layers to have, like, if since that's at a very large scale, maybe we don't want to see all of this detail in here. And so we freeze the ADT layers, and that leaves like the blocks and things on the ASE layers, A section layers. And so that's one real good way of controlling that. Let's see if I have, let's go back to open. I think building sections. I think I may have frozen all the detail layers in here. Let's see. This is looking at that same drawing. No, I just left them on. The problem with a lot of this stuff is it has a tendency to get to a big black blob at very, like this is an 1/8 inch scale, so suddenly all this stuff, you remember this, when this is going to get plotted out, this is probably only about 3 inches high, so you have to be careful. Sometimes this all turns into just mess. So you have to be a little bit careful. But I'm not sure if you're aware of it. Here's how, like if we saw a building section drawing, you'll notice we've got these numbers attached to these little bubbles. This tells you on detail 3 of sheet A5.01, that's where you'll find this wall section. And 5.1 is what we had open a minute ago. So if we come over here, here's 3, and there's that wall section. If you want to go see how we dealt with this, that's detail 13 on A501. Ophand means it, well, you'll see in a second. It means opposite hand. So let's go to 13. Where's 13? 13, 13, 13. Here's 13. Oops. This is 501. Ooh, look, I've got a screw up. And it went out like this. Oh, no. Obviously, I've got the wrong number there. What should it have been? It's flush with the, okay, basically it's the gutter detail. I bet it got moved to another sheet. I bet you we had it on this sheet at one time and it got moved, and then we came in and added something in the space where it was. Let's see if it's on 502. That's 402. More information than you needed to know. It may just be it got moved and didn't get rekeyed. Who knows? Well, anyway, you'll notice we got a lot of different scales on here too. But yes, these numbers should have been correct, and that was not the case on that one. Oops, let's see. Here's kind of a similar detail. Oh, look, it still refers to that 13A501. Wow. We must have, I hope they built it right. Eek. But anyway, this is why we have all these numbers on here. But yes, that's certainly not a gutter detail. But anyway, let's look at what we're going to look at today, because now we're just to the point where I've got us caught up, because I'd forgotten to do some stuff from yesterday's assignment. One of the things about, this talks about, freezing and thawing the different layers. It talks about using object and polygonal. We did that. Here's that circle one I was talking about. And we had talked about setting the viewport scale with the zoom command. Occasionally you'll have reason to do this. Let me close this. Especially if you're dealing with site plans. That's the one time you're really going to get into this. Nah, we don't need to save that. Let me go open phase 1. No, it's not in this directory. Oh, Bennett may have had a site plan. Drawings, phase 1. Existing site. Let's look at the new work site. In this case, I've got a 1 to 20. 1 inch equals 20 feet. That's very typical for civil engineers. They use the decimal type things. If I click on this viewport, which I have frozen the viewport layer, so let's go thaw. It's probably on the ZMP1. Thaw. I have a whole bunch of XREFs in here. Let's thaw that. Right now, you'll notice it just gives me some funny number down here. If we click the down arrow, stop it. If we click the down arrow, oh, because I'm locked. If we click the down arrow, we have some of the other scales. 1 inch equals 20 feet. But you notice it doesn't show very many of them. It shows this because I've already created it. sometimes you're going to have to, and this is not 1 inch, this is 1 inch equals 20 inches, so be careful. These are like kind of when you start getting into metric scales when you have this kind of number. But to do these, I mean, deliberately mess it up. Okay. When you have these, and you don't, like I say, I wanted it at 1 to 30. You notice there was no 1 to 30 in there. Like 1 inch equals 20 feet, but not 1 inch equals 30 feet. You're going to have to figure out, okay, 1 inch equals 30 feet. That means, what's the multiplier for that? Well, basically take 30, multiply it times 12, get 360, and that's the zoom number. So let's zoom 1/360 XP. Did I put my slash in there this time? Okay, good. And then we can pan over, make sure you don't zoom, and now you have your 1 to 360 thing. Let's see if it actually shows it now. Nope. You could probably go to custom and create it. Let's see. We'd have to go to add. And that's how I did the 1 to 20. So let's 1 inch. I'd put a space equals space 30. Oops, it didn't like something. Equals 30. Oops, feet. Okay. Let's see if we need to edit it. Yep, so 360. And okay. And so now we can actually find that. But those numbers don't normally show up. Like when you click on it. Oops, I clicked inside it. Paper space. Click. Now it'll show 1 to 30. That's an awful lot of work. It's easier to just use the zoom command and just remember that you got it right. And remember to lock it so that it doesn't screw up again. Let's undo, 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 undo. Okay, we're back before I messed with anything. And you notice I've stuck some details over here that we didn't use on this job. We do this kind of thing a lot. You'll notice, let's go look at the model space out here. There is stuff all over this sheet. We'll try different layouts, we'll try certain things, and we'll keep those details, or we'll bring details in from other projects to adjust. And so when you see the model space of most drawings, they're really cluttered. And so we go into the paper space layout. That's the one where you can have all these all the different viewports looking at stuff. Note that you can have more than one layout. If we type layout and I hit copy, and we'll just hit enter because that's the one that's current, and we'll call it Bob. We can call it anything we want to. You'll notice I now have a layout called Bob, and it looks exactly like the one I was just working on. We'll do this a lot of times when we're going from the floor plan to a reflected ceiling plan. But in this case, let's say we wanted to look at this not, we wanted to create this so it's not to a 32 by 40 or a 36 by a 30 by 40 sheet, an E-size sheet, but we wanted to make a layout that was specifically for an 8.5 by 11. We could do that very easily by creating another layer and call it like 8.5 by 11 or something like that, and then change the page setup. Where that was on output, page setup manager, modify, and we could change all the settings. So that's real handy. That way you don't have to, kind of like, oh, I got to scale it down or something like this. You can just do it once. You don't do this too often. A lot of people, what they'll do if they're not in an office where a whole bunch of people need to be on it, they'll do a floor plan, the bathroom plan, because that's usually, floor plan is usually 1/8 inch in commercial work. The enlarged bathroom plan's at 1/4 inch. You may have the reflected ceiling and plan in here. And so you can create a number of sheets in here rather than having them as separate drawings. Like I said, the only bad thing about that is now one person can only work. If one person's on those 3 sheets, no one else can work on those 3 sheets. So it's better not to do stuff like that in a big office. And we're going to talk about XREFs next time. XREFs are like blocks that update themselves. So you bring an XREF into them, like that's really what this is. And so if someone makes a change, I'll get a little flag down here that says, hey, this drawing has changed. Do you want to update? And so it keeps all of your drawing sets updated, yet a lot of people can work on the drawings at the same time. But that's the next lecture. But all right, thank you very much.